This is how to lower a motorcycle using a 2010/18 BMW S1000RR as an example. In this example, I'm going to be lowering both the front end and the rear end so that I keep the geometry the same, and I'm doing this for the purpose of reducing my profile and my resulting drag for the upcoming Texas Mile. The big thing I don't want to do is mess up the geometry of the bike, i.e. the rake angle of the front forks, because that would jack with the handling. To ensure that, I'll start by leaning the bike against a wall where it's perfectly vertical on flat ground and tape the tire positions for reference so I'm measuring in the same place each time. I measured to a set point both up front and on the tail section to document the baseline heights. With proper tire pressure, so at the end of the lowering, I know both front and back are the same amount lower and the geometry of the rake angle is the same. Note that I'm measuring the static sag, which is the weight of the bike, not rider sag, which is the sag with the rider and the bike. Even better is to have a buddy measure with the rider in full gear for rider sag, but as just one guy, as long as I don't mess with anything else, a 1 inch lower static sag should be 1 inch lower rider sag. And I guess now I might as well start taking all this plastic stuff off because I'll have to get at the front as well as back here. I've got the plastics off the front, and now I'm going to start getting the parts that I need to change it all over and lay them out. All right, here's the different things that I've got to install. So I have the lowering kit here, which is going to take the place of some of the linkages at the bottom of the shock and allow the whole bike to sit down a couple inches lower. As a result of that, you also need the lower kickstand. And you can see that is going to be a couple inches lower here as well, which makes sense. I think what I'm going to do is measure the height of the tubes coming up out of the triple trees first, use that as my starting point, and then I'm going to try to pull them up about 2 inches if everything works to do that. Get the front where I want it, and then stop there, and then go to the back and just adjust that. I then measured the protrusion of the front forks through the top of the triple tree so I can easily put it back to stock after the event. Before changing anything, you have to do a little trigonometry. The forks are at an angle, so moving them up in the trees a set amount drops the whole front of the bike some amount less than that. For example, my bike has a 23.9 degree rake, and that means that to drop it 2 inches, I would be moving the forks in the trees 2.19 inches. So you'll have to calculate that for whatever the rake of your bike is. Before I take the fender and all this off, I put a line across here to kind of mark on the forks where the top of the fender comes up, so that as I start pulling these up in to the triple trees, I can kind of use that for a guide to guess where is that going to start hitting stuff. The next step is to remove the front wheel assembly. In order to do this, you're going to have to use one of the stands that has a pin that goes up in the bottom triple tree clamp. I'm going to take these bottom ones loose first so that that floats, and I'm going to use these top ones to adjust tight or loose to actually get it to move. So these get adjusted out all the way for full loose. All right, I've rotated and moved both fork tubes up to exactly 2 inches. I was going to drop the bike 2 inches front and back with a 2 inch lower kickstand. Here's where I made the mistake. See how the fork gets smaller diameter below the tree? The clip-on has to grab right below the tree, and when I moved the fork up a full 2 inches like I planned, I got the bike all washed and I put a little pressure pushing the bike in, and the whole clip-on came loose. And what happened, if you look at it, I didn't check to see how much engagement the clamp had with the thick part that goes through the trees. I checked it on the bottom, but I didn't check it on the top. So I did the whole project, then realized the mistake and had to redo it. Not all forks neck down. The stock ones for this bike do not, in fact, but these Öhlins do, probably for weight savings. I had to go back and change it so it was only lowered by 1 inch versus the 2 inches originally planned. That way the clip-on could still grab. So I'm going to try that, tighten this a little bit, Try tightening the clip on and see if that stays now. Once I had it adjusted down by the new desired 1 inch, now that everything is snug, I'm going to torque each one of the 8 screws to the 19 Newton meters this bike requires, and put the front wheel back in place. With the rear wheel on the stand, I replaced the kickstand with the shorter one. The video for that is in the description below, but you need to do that or the bike won't stand right if the kickstand isn't lowered as much as the front and rear end. I did have the 2-inch lower kickstand as I mentioned earlier, and only went down 1 inch front and back, so it's leaning a little bit more towards the kickstand, but that's better than falling over the other way, and it'll still work. The next step was to remove the stock link and replace it with the adjustable link. So what I'm going to do is swap out the lowering link with the standard link while it's up in the air. Now I can't do that with the swing arm attached and being supported like this, because the minute I take that link out, this will just collapse. So I need to support the bike from the frame side. Now the way I do it is I use 2 jack stands, and I use the fact that I've got a fixed foot peg in the rear set to stabilize it. So I'm just going to lower the bike down onto these 2 jack stands to hold it still so that the swing arm is loose and I can swap that link. Now what I should have done is loosen these bolts while it was still stable. Oops, there's that pin out. And there's the pin in the front. So the stock link is out. It's going to get replaced by this lowering link. Apparently the notches here signify left-hand threads, so I'm going to put them both on the rear. So start with the front pin, the one I just took out. Get this in place. Push that pin through. And start screwing that into the other boss. Bring up the swing arm. These guys back through there with that pin. I'm just going to get these pretty snug for now. We'll torque this and the front one down after we get everything adjusted. Just don't forget. Now that that lower link is in place and the bolts are snug for it, I'm going to put the bike back on the rear stand just because I feel a little bit more comfortable with it like that. The back wheel is in place. So now what I'm going to do before I set it down is, remember I've already put the lower kickstand on, but if I set it down with the wheel where it normally was, the kickstand won't be tall enough. And so it's also going to be easier to get at that lowering link with it up in the air. So I'm going to try to get it shorter from here to here, and then I'll set it down and fine tune everything. These are the lowering links. So the first thing you got to do is loosen the jam nuts on each end of both of these. And these, because they have the little notch right there, that means this is a left-hand thread. So this front one will back off normally. Same with this one. Backs off normally. And these guys are the other way. Don't forget left-hand threads. I'm going to get a marker and I'm going to mark each one of these where they started, so that in case I lose count or something, I always know I have them even. Alright, this one here, it's a black mark right there, and this one, it's a black mark there. If we want the rear end to go up, That means this has to get longer to allow it to go up, which means that this will have to go, see, that would be down. I'll try to do both of these. That's one, and that's one. Now let's see if it made any difference with the... I continued to adjust and measure the tail until it was 1 inch lower from its original position like I did in the front, so I maintained the same geometry. All right, do one more quick check of the math, but I should be 1 inch low rear, 1 inch low front. The other item for discussion is strapping the front. In this case, I strapped the front to the rider sag position. So I know I dropped it 1 inch on the static sag, then strapped it down to the rider sag. But measuring the front with it strapped won't show 1 inch lower, it'll show 1 inch plus the rider sag lower. If I were to overstrap it, in other words, strap it more than the rider sag, it would be even more drastic, and you'd have to adjust the rear so that the rider sag of the rear was dropped the same amount of the strapping too. For this project, the rear was dropped 1 inch on static sag, matching the 1 inch drop on the front static sag. So when I sit on it, the drop in the rear rider sag will be the same 1 inch drop like the front is strapped. This can be really confusing, so just remember the ultimate goal is with you in full gear on the bike, strapped or not, has to be lower in front and back by the same amount so the geometry isn't altered. Once the suspension is all adjusted, then it's just a matter of reassembly and proper torquing before you're ready to try it out. Subscribe to my YouTube channel below and let's celebrate turning fuel and air into adrenaline!